Welcome to Talking Design and Engineering by MakeLab. Insights and advice from industry leaders driving innovation and shaping the future of people, processes, and technology in the world of physical products. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talking Design Engineering. My name is Christina Perla. I'm the co-founder of MakeLab, and I'm also the host today. And with me is Anson Cheung, who is an industrial designer based in the Bay Area. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've known about you for a little while. I think once I started jumping back into ID around the same time that I started this podcast maybe a year ago, but we didn't meet until maybe a couple weeks ago at the beginning of my long stay in SF. So this is awesome that we're doing this.
Yeah, I remember you replied to one of my newsletters earlier this year. When you emailed me again, I recognized your name. So yeah, I'm glad we got to meet and connect.
Same. And I think a lot of people know you for Just ID Jobs, which is so cool that you built that. I think it's a really helpful, needed resource. So that's awesome. But I always like to start out these episodes with backstory. Who are you as a person? How did you get here?
Great.
That was super vague.
Who am I as a person? That's really deep. But I think in terms
crisis.
of design, I'm solidly an industrial designer. I've made my career creating physical things. A lot of the friends that I went to design school with actually have gone over to the dark side and gotten a lot better stock options, but that's a different story.
UX?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a different story. But yeah, so I'm actually one of the few in my friend group that actually still is an industrial designer.
Yeah.
But that's been my career for the past 13 years or so. But I think it goes way back from when I was a kid. And I think a lot of designers have these kinds of stories where they liked playing with Legos. And for me, it was definitely Legos, but also I really liked building like model kits. And I grew up in Hong Kong, so we had a lot of like Japanese influence. And like I used to make these little robot model kits called Gundams. And I think they're getting a lot more popular in the US now, but like when I was a kid, they were really popular in Hong Kong. And so I was already like deep into like injection molding without really knowing it, because these kits would come with these extremely intricate like injection molded parts that you would have to take apart and then put back together and snap together. I was, as a kid, just really into making things with my hands, drawing, and I was lucky that my parents encouraged me to just explore whatever interests that I had. So I had drawing classes, I like had hobbies where I was just in my room like knocking things together, like screwing things together, gluing pieces of wood together, making like boats and stuff. That was like childhood. And I went to a international school in Hong Kong, and that school in particular followed the UK curriculum because Hong Kong used to be a British colony.
Right.
Again, different story. But in the UK at that point in time, I think maybe not anymore, but they have a subject called design and technology that you have to take until like I think 8th or 9th grade, just as a general subject.
Interesting.
And our school had a pretty decent setup. They had an actual workshop. They had a table saw. They had no 3D printers at the time, but they had all kinds of cool tools, and we had projects to do with just design and make like cool stuff. And they introduced us to a very basic design process. Of course, nothing like you would get at the college or professional level, but it was the basic come up with ideas and then like prototype, funnel them down, develop, and actually make the final product at the end. So I was exposed to industrial design pretty early in high school, which is really fortunate because I think from interviewing a lot of designers for jobs, I learned that most people didn't actually get to they didn't even know industrial design was a thing until like sometimes after their first college degree.
Yes.
So I was lucky that in like 7th grade, it was exposed to me industrial design is a thing and it's something you could do as a job. And I think that really set me on the path to becoming a professional industrial designer, because I didn't really think about doing anything else after that. Because like I was like okay at other subjects. I was good at like history and like math and stuff, but I was not really interested in pursuing anything else professionally.
Same.
Once I found out like, oh, you can just make stuff and draw as a job,
This
then
is a
yeah,
career
that's what
path?
I'm gonna do.
What?
Yeah, so when it came time to apply to colleges, I just applied to a bunch of art schools in the US because I don't know like why this is, but if you grow up in Hong Kong and you're maybe a little bit more off in terms of your circumstances, your parents like to send you to school in like the US or the UK. And that's very much been the pattern for like many years. So when it came time to go to college, I was encouraged to apply to like schools in the US. And so I applied to a couple of different ones, and I ended up getting into my top choice, which was the Rhode Island School of Design. And I went to school there, having never been to Rhode Island, which was a real shock.
What was it like? I'm just curious. I've been there.
The first time I got there, because Hong Kong is like a major metropolitan city.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's like New York is the closest
Yes.
that I've ever seen to a city that even resembles Hong Kong.
I've
So
been
when I
there
got
once.
to Providence, Rhode Island, I was like, oh my God, where am I? What sort of water town
Backwater.
did I end up in? I knew it was going to be different, but I
Yeah.
didn't think it was going to be that different. But I ended up loving it. Providence is a great place to go to college. It has a little college bubble with RISD and Brown.
Yeah.
So yeah, loved going to school there and made some of the best friends that I'll probably have for the rest of my
Awesome.
life while I was there. But yeah, at RISD, freshman year was like a foundation program,
Same.
which I think is actually pretty different from how many ID schools are these
Pratt
days.
was the same.
Yeah.
Pratt probably copied RISD.
I think those two schools are like known for that.
Yeah.
So I was doing all kinds of art stuff, and but I still had my eye set on industrial design. And so after foundation year, where they break your brain and make you do all kinds of weird stuff, it was straight back into ID 2nd to 4th year.
Wait, question. Did you have to do an LCD, like color design course?
No, what is that?
We just focused on color, and I distinctly remember only being able to use the primaries in black and white for any medium, and we had to make like color.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, draw.
Yeah, I did
based on
have
that.
what was at that time called a 2D design class in freshman year. And one of the exercises was to paint a gradient
Yes.
with gouache. And you had to get 10 equal steps from like black to white. And yeah, that was interesting. And I think we had to do some other color stuff with gouache.
Yeah.
But it really depended on what teacher you had. Like some professors followed like some pretty standard 2D curriculum, like old school
Yeah.
2D curriculum, like that gouache stuff. And then there were some professors who were more just do whatever you want. This is a chance for you to explore your creativity. And you're like,
What?
but how do I get a good grade? And they're like, do whatever you want. So
Art
yeah,
school in a bubble.
but I think actually freshman year was pretty important
Yeah.
because it broke down any prior ways of thinking that you
Agreed.
had, and it encouraged you to think in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that actually was an important part of my design education.
Agreed. Same.
So yeah, I think RISD has a pretty traditional ID curriculum, maybe even a little too traditional compared to maybe some of the newer programs.
Yeah.
But that has its strengths and weaknesses. It's very heavily rooted in making,
Mm-hmm.
which I find is very informative of my process now, which is still very heavily rooted in hands-on making and prototyping, which I'm glad for that experience. But yeah, after 3 years of ID there, I graduated and started working professionally. I had done like 1 or 2 internships while I was in school. And then actually after I graduated, I had a internship at NASA, the space people. So that was a really fun, like
the
kind
best
of
description of NASA.
a post-graduation like
that.
excursion. Because the last studio class that I had in senior year was a NASA sponsored studio, and like they from every year they picked 2 students to go do an internship for the summer.
That's awesome.
So I got to go to Houston and see all kinds of space stuff and do space related like habitat design for the summer after graduation. So that was really cool, but I didn't think I wanted to do that as my job because it was interesting, but it was of course very slow because it is still kind of government-based work. And also at that time NASA was transitioning to private contractors a lot more, as you see now with SpaceX basically running all the space station missions and Boeing and all that. So at that time, which was 2012, they're already in the process of that. So there's like less and less for NASA itself to do. Yeah. Also, I didn't particularly enjoy living in Houston. It was just too hot. So yeah, a summer in Houston got to see all kinds of rockets and space shuttles, and I got to watch the last space shuttle launch from the Space Center. So not the one where they actually launched it, that's in Florida, but I got to watch it from the Space Center in Houston. So
oh, cool.
That was quite a great experience to have had.
That's cool.
So yeah, after college, after that internship, I knew that I wanted to get into design consulting because as it is now, even then, like design consulting was like where all the cool people went. And that was like how you got your break into the like fancy world of industrial design as a professional.
Yep.
At least that's what I thought at the time. I know now there's so many ways you can branch off, and I would say design consulting is a very good way to get into industrial design as a career path, but it's not the only way that a lot of students think that it is, and that I thought that it was back then.
It was very much the thing to do in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Like I graduated around that time too, and the thing was to work at a firm. Yeah. Of any size. And
like people from Smart Design and IDEO came to give talks at our school, and they just made it seem so cool, so fun, and just it didn't even seem like they were working. It seemed like they were just like doing fun stuff.
That's so true.
All the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was trying my best to get into design consulting with not a lot of luck because the barrier to entry is like quite high. And one of the things that RISD did not particularly prepare us for is having like very polished portfolios.
Yeah.
One thing that lots of RISD people have told me is that RISD trains you to be a creative director, not a junior designer, which was like at the time, it was like, okay, this is not useful information because I'm trying to be a junior designer right now.
Gotta start somewhere.
So great, I'm gonna have a great job in 10 years.
Yeah.
But right now I need a job like now.
Wow, that's so similar to Pratt.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, I'm sure
Same
like
feedback.
Yeah, the
So
same
old
kind
school.
of traditional design curriculum teaches you how to think, teaches you how to make stuff, but doesn't always give you like that polished portfolio that you need to get that first job. So I spent like a lot of time that summer in Houston polishing my portfolio, talking to people who did get jobs in consulting and trying to understand like what it was that they had that I didn't at the time. And I got my portfolio to a place where I felt like it was okay. And I just kept applying But I didn't really have any luck. So I went back to Providence, Rhode Island for a little bit just to reset and do some contract work and just see what my next path was. So I got a contracting job at a small consulting studio there, which is called Observatory, and it's run by two RISD grads, and I consider them my first real professional bosses, and I have them to thank for being put on this path, because it's really that first job that gets you into like hireable territory, where you've got the proof, okay, you managed to get one professional design job, you can probably start to get others.
It's like the first door.
Yeah, so I was there for about 3 months, and at that time, San Francisco was like, and it still is now, but like at that time it was becoming like the beacon for industrial design.
Yes.
And everyone who was building their career wanted to move out there. And so I wanted to move out there. And me and my roommate and one of my best friends at the time, we, as you do in your early 20s, we were just like, hey, let's move to San Francisco. And that was it. We just like decided to move.
I love that.
And I tried really hard to get a job or an internship or something out in the Bay. And luckily, with the portfolio work that I had put in over the summer, and like also getting to know people through just networking and talking to my connections, I was able to land an internship at a small design firm called Bold Design. And I moved out to San Francisco in early 2012. And I ended up staying at Bold for about 10, almost 11 years. Yeah, I started as an intern, and at that time I was the third person. They had the company founded by Fred Bold, hence the name, he had been working for about 15 years at that point. But he was always, I think, roughly around two, maybe three people. So at that time, I joined as the third person as an intern at that time. And right at that moment, I think we were doing work with some up and coming names like Roku at that time. So I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, because in 2012, those companies were small startups.
Right.
And now they are household names.
Yes.
I didn't work on all of those projects, and I can't say that I was responsible for this success or anything.
Yeah.
Like, much of the work was already done by the time I got there. But getting there at that time in 2012 was probably one of the luckiest breaks of my career.
That's great.
Because the company just continued to grow over the time that I spent there.
Wow.
And it was, I think, a confluence of many things. Like in the 2010s, it was really the decade of IoT, and our little studio became one of the go-to firms for developing IoT products.
Wow.
And so practically every week there were new entrepreneurs and startups calling us and saying, hey, can you like design our smart this, that, and the other? And, and so, yeah, I started,
awesome.
I started in 2012. I like didn't know anything. I didn't know my head from other parts. And I learned really quickly, and I had a really good mentor in my friend and mentor, Fred, who still runs Bold Design.
Nice.
And he taught me a lot. He had a lot of patience for me. And I was there for about 4 years just doing projects, like just churning through consumer electronics, like robotics, any kind of Silicon Valley design stuff that you can think of pretty much came through our doors. And about 4 years in, I think he realized that he wanted to continue growing the company and he needed help
Yeah.
to take it beyond the size we were back in 2016,
Yeah.
which was, I would say, 5 or 6 people. So he brought me and another designer on as business partners. So I became a partner in that firm.
That's incredible.
Yeah, again,
Like, what a crazy story. That's insane.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, let's move. Got this internship. Let's see where it goes. It's not just luck and timing. Like they didn't have to keep you on.
Right.
So it was a good fit on both ends, and you rode this wave. That's amazing, in a really great time. Amazing.
Yeah, I think I worked really hard during those years, but I think one thing that I always tell people is that there is always an element of luck and
Yes.
timing. You can only put yourself in the right situations. You can't control the outcome sometimes.
Yeah.
So I had absolutely no clue that this was going to happen, but when I was there, I tried to learn as much as I could and work hard to get to a point where I felt like I was good at my craft and could start to take on additional responsibility.
Nice.
So in 2016, I became a partner at Bold Design along with, so we were 3 partners. It was me, Fred, and Jeremy. And we grew the studio over the next 6 years to almost 20 people and continued to do
Whoa.
a lot of technology-based design and kind of building on that momentum. Not just consumer electronics or IoT, it was just all kinds of technology innovation, like some very interesting things, some things that definitely took off, and some things that, Silicon Valley didn't take off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like one of the most dynamic decades of my life, and like things
Wow.
really changed for me, and I was very fortunate to be in that position, and I learned a ton, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And in 2022, I decided to step out on my own, and so I became an independent designer where basically I take on client projects by myself or with a small team it's a little bit flexible, like I hire contractors and interns. And that's basically how I'm working now. And I'm still very much focused on technology. I've started to niche down into like medical and robotics and high tech stuff because I had the chance to work on a lot of that over my
That's cool.
previous decade of my career, and I find that stuff really interesting, and I think it's where design can add a lot of value, and that's what I'm doing now. So
That's so cool.
that's the backstory. I know I said it would be 5 minutes, but I think that was a lot longer than 5
No,
minutes.
but you have a pretty rich history, so it deserves the time. What would you say? The Bold story is insane. You went from intern to partner. Like, just, that's insane. That's like, kudos to you. That's great. What was like a pivotal, because, okay, I remember being right out of school. There's a lack of confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just like you were saying, I also didn't know what was up, what was down. What am I supposed to do? I have all these like skills. I could draw, I could render, I could model. How do I piece it together? What was like the one project that kind of brought all your skills together and gave you the confidence?
Yeah, I have a very distinct memory of a specific project. In 2012, they were still a small startup, maybe not super small, but they were growing, and they were just onto their, I think, 3rd or 4th generation device.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first project that I was allowed to own, more or less. I had a lot of help. I still wouldn't say I knew exactly what I was doing, and I had a lot of guidance from the people around me.
Yeah.
But I think it was the first project where I could be the primary driver, and then everyone else could give me inputs and I could take it into account. And we were such a small team that even at that time when I was a junior designer, I was given a lot of responsibility interacting with the client, like doing a lot of the concept development, sketching, like CAD modeling, like basically all the parts of the process. And I remember that project specifically because it's really the first product that I felt like I could see the through line from a sketch that I had on a piece of paper all the way to something that I could go to Best Buy and buy off the shelf.
Wow.
And I got to experience every single part of that process and make pretty much every single mistake possible and learn from it.
Yeah.
So I think going through that process of making the mistakes, being given guidance and mentorship on how to go through the process and come out the other end with something that sold very successfully. Like I think they probably sold like millions of those things.
It's amazing.
And I've even seen it in people's houses. I think that was one of the first products where I walked into someone's house and I saw it on their like media console and I was like, wow, like that's that's our work. Like, I shouldn't say the word my because it's always a team effort. So after that project, I felt like I knew at least for a product of that scale. Right. So it's like a small plastic housing, like 2-3 housing set-top box. After that, I was like, okay, for this kind of product, I know what I'm doing. Like I'm not like a master at it, but I've gone through the whole cycle.
Right.
And I'm ready to do it again.
Right.
And maybe do it better next time and more independently.
How long was that whole development process? I feel, and like how did, if you could share, like how did the client come to you? Were they already like completely new? I don't know what this looks like. We want something like this. It's going to live in this type of environment. Or did they have something that you guys like iterated on or?
Yeah, when I picked up that project, Bold Design had already been doing set-top boxes and remotes for a couple of generations.
Got it.
So there was a lot of understanding of the design DNA and shared trust in the client-vendor relationship. So in that respect, it was a little bit easier for me because it wasn't like building something up from scratch. It was like taking something and evolving it. And there was a lot of credibility already with the studio.
Nice.
So I think it wasn't a matter of starting from scratch.
Yeah, but I feel like that's also a great like learning environment.
Yeah.
Like you need something new, but there is history behind it. To be honest, like what company does an industrial designer work with that isn't like that unless you're brand new?
Yeah, usually.
I feel like it rarely starts at invention.
I think usually there's something you can work off of, even if it's a completely new company. In San Francisco, or in the Bay Area in general, there's like new companies every day.
Yeah.
But at least hopefully the founder has some vision for what they're trying to make. And if they don't, maybe it's not quite the right time to engage a designer.
Yeah.
So I think you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Agreed. But yeah, like how long was that entire process like when you first started and then when it went to manufacturing?
I think it was at least a year.
Nice.
Which I think is fairly common for consumer products because there's just all the supply chain side and like logistics. But it's a lot of upfront effort and then it's more like follow up and kind of review and feedback afterwards.
I've been talking about this a lot, like just networking in the Bay Area for the 2 months that I've been here. I've been talking to a lot of industrial designers and the topic of leaning different ways. And we spoke about this right before we started filming. Like you can go more manufacturing. Sometimes an industrial designer can go more engineering. Sometimes it can go they can go more CMF. Like there's a lot of different ways. But would you say, and we also talked about the risk of if you don't have the knowledge of supply chain stuff, you risk the design essence being lost during the more technical aspects of the product. Like how in general, maybe not just, this isn't a question just about this product, but like how do you go about that? Because there's so much, it almost seems like there's not enough knowledge in the world that an industrial designer can utilize, and it's like overwhelming.
Yeah, I think one thing that designers can keep in mind is that you're not an engineer.
Yeah.
You don't need to know exactly all the parameters or like all the knowledge about some very obscure process, but I think you need to know what questions to ask, especially when you're working with an engineer. Like, what questions do you have to ask to get the parameters that you need that will affect your design? Because you don't need to be like an exact expert in, say, like injection molding, but you need to know that your part is going to be injection molded, and generally there are these constraints around injection molding.
Yeah.
And you don't have to know the specific draft angle required, but you need to know that there is going to be draft. Like,
Yeah.
I think you conceptually need to understand how your process affects your design, but you don't have to always know exactly every single detail. And as long as you're baking that kind of thinking into your design process, where you are thinking about manufacturing and also consulting the people that do have the knowledge to give input, I think you can be fairly confident that you're doing something that is feasible in the real world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you did oversee the supply chain and the designing for manufacturing and stuff for the set top?
For that, I would say the client handled a lot of it, has been making products for a long time, so they were fairly sophisticated in their supply chain and manufacturing.
Got it.
I basically handled the kind of feedback that needed to be integrated into the design, and then also considering the manufacturing up front.
Yeah.
Like during the design process and the concept process for that product, we had to think about like, how is it going to be injection molded? How many parts are there going to be? The more parts there are, the more cost. The fact that they're using probably a shiny plastic means like you can get away with this draft angle. And so there were like considerations up front, and then also kind of reacting to feedback from the vendor and supply chain side of things after the design was.
Yeah. And then I don't know if I've ever asked this on the podcast, but I'm always curious about the research side of it too. Did you have an involvement in that and like user feedback and like user research? Or do you normally have that? Or
So I think my process has always been like, do enough research so that you have a first-hand experience of what the usability challenges are, what the design problems are. And I know a lot of companies have very well developed research teams and resources, so a lot of times like clients will have a better understanding of the problem than you, and they can pass certain information on to you. I think for me personally, I would rather work with experts in the research and getting good data and good insights rather than try and come up with it myself if I'm not particularly the expert on it. So I think research and user experience, like understanding, is critical to creating good industrial design. But I think these days industrial designers, especially if you're like more on the industrial design side of things, it's not always like our role to do that.
Yeah, I hear, and I think you eliminate bias if you work with others, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like bias is really important to be considered in whenever designing a physical product. Like, the world is diverse.
Yeah.
There's so many different perspectives to think through, and so if you're trying to do everything yourself, you're gonna create a biased product.
Yeah. And it's just not possible for you to be an expert in every product that you're asked to design. Like, right now I'm doing a lot of medical work, and there's no way that I can understand like how this medical procedure is done to the most infinitesimal detail.
Yeah.
I do try to get a bird's eye view, like whenever possible. I go to the OR and watch the procedure being done.
Like from above?
No, I mean the bird's eye view of the design problem, not like literally a bird's eye view.
Because there's some ORs where you have like,
yeah.
I'm just thinking of the TV shows that I've watched where you can literally watch from above.
Yeah, so I'll at least try to be in the room and get like an overall understanding of the process. But
do you have to scrub in?
Yes.
Whoa.
But with these medical companies, they have dedicated clinical engineering teams and user experience researchers that are taking care of that stuff to a much higher degree of fidelity. So my job is to interface with them,
right,
rather than to go in and do the research myself.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That's so cool, though.
Yeah, I've been in an OR a lot more than I thought I would be as an industrial designer.
You're just like, yeah, I'm going to get coffee in the morning. Later, I've got an OR. I've got a surgery I've got to attend.
Yep.
Casually.
Yeah, I have found myself standing in an OR with like scrubs on and like looking at a surgery being done and thinking like, how did I end up here?
You're just having one of those out of body moments.
Yeah, and
where
like, wait, I thought I was an industrial designer.
That's so cool, though. I must say, I think one of my professors was Linda. Man, I'm blanking on her last name, but she designed the Dunkin' logo. And she was at Herman Miller, and she used to talk about the learning process. And again, like you said, you're not the expert, but you're observing and absorbing enough and interfacing with to get the main points to really to be able to incorporate it. And that was, to me, I think the part that made me fall in love with ideas, this constant learning. You can even specialize in a sector like medical and still need to learn like all the different subsectors of medical to incorporate and make good design. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, when's the last time you were in a surgery or observing a surgery?
2 months ago.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty recent.
Whoa. That's so cool.
It was. It really was.
Yeah. What about a memorable, more recent project? Like, does one come to mind that, I don't know, this is a very broad question, but how has your process evolved? And then also, how is it so different? What are some key differences and learnings? A lot, but.
I think a more memorable recent project, I won't be able to talk about the details since it's still in development, but I recently worked on a medical product that was larger and like pretty complex from a mechanical standpoint. And I think one of the changes in my process is that I've started to rely on 3D printing a lot more. And in this project, it was particularly useful because I actually managed to make a entirely 3D printed one-to-one mock-up of a product that is like as big as a person using quite a small 3D printer.
In your home? Like in your home office?
No, in my studio, but it was all made on a Bamboo X1C. And that...
Wow.
Yeah. It was as big
short
as...
Short person or tall person? Is that short person? Still a person.
Short person.
Damn.
But person-sized. And I think that, to me, illustrated one of the biggest changes for me in my process because of the change in the way that I'm working. I work in a much smaller team now. Usually it's just either me or me and an intern, maybe contractor. For this project, it was just me and a contractor. And previously, I used to tell designers that I worked with to not rely on 3D printing as much because I felt like it made them lazy because they didn't get hands-on with the problem.
Also,
they just,
you come from RISD, I come from Pratt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where's the shop in this?
Exactly.
Give me some sawdust.
Yeah. But I think as I've started working on larger stuff, it's less practical to be making all that stuff
Yeah.
by hand. And also 3D printers can work while you sleep. So
It's
a lot of
efficient.
these big parts, I just printed them overnight, and most of the time I would come in the morning and they'd be done. And then I could put them together. There's still, I guess, a lot of hands-on work because I'm just using the 3D printer to make the parts, but I'm still like assembling and kind
Right.
of feeling out the design
Right.
with my hands.
Oh.
So I think because that I have less people to work with, it becomes more convenient and more effective to use 3D printers
Yeah.
essentially as robots that work for you while you sleep.
Yeah.
So I think that has been a huge evolution thanks to the advancement of 3D printing, because when I first used a 3D printer at work, it was like an early MakerBot, and it was not even guaranteed that you would get like a small cube
Yeah. I remember
in a
those
few
days.
hours.
Yeah.
And it was just not viable. Like
Yeah.
the risk was too high. You had to constantly monitor it, and
Yeah.
all the parameters had to be just right or it would just blow up. And to now where I have this 3D printer that is like automatic leveling, automatic like filament loading, like all this stuff.
Yep.
And the way I think about 3D printing as it relates to my process as a prototyping tool has changed completely. And I think that's really exciting because then I can scale like certain parts of my process more easily. Like instead of having a team of interns or junior designers like cranking out prototypes, the 3D printers can do it, and
Yes.
they can just do it overnight.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of things like that happening in design. Of course, AI is like the big one,
Yep.
where certain parts of the process can be automated and sped up and take less hands-on time. So the way we think about our design process has to change. And I guess fortunately or unfortunately, it does require slightly less human input at some points. But hopefully that means that the humans are doing things that humans are more uniquely suited to. Because instead of me like in the shop making a giant prototype, I can be thinking about the design. I can
Yeah.
be thinking about the client's needs. I can be considering the user experience more in more depth rather than shaving a block of foam.
Yeah. For hours.
Yeah.
And then messing up
Yeah.
in the middle. Yeah. Agreed. I think it's interesting too because it kind of forces you to think about efficiency as well. Like at least at Pratt, and you probably experienced something similar, it was like I spent hours shaving plaster, like in
Yeah.
a shop. Pouring it, letting it dry, hoping it wouldn't expand outside of the mold and break everything and explode. And then shaving it down with literally drywall tools and meshes. And a lot of it was like the thought process behind that was like feeling the form
Yeah.
and like really getting empathetic on a whole nother level
Right.
of sensing it. Whereas now it's you take away some of that exploratory, but it creates a need for a little bit more empathy, like in a digital sense. And then also, are you the designer that prints like 50 million prototypes out of plastic, or are you gonna try to hone in a little bit? It's an interesting difference.
I think there's a balance. I have worked with some designers who are like maybe I would, for me, consider too digital, where they are like completely disconnected from the
Yes.
hands-on aspect altogether.
Yeah.
And I think it's not really possible to create physical things without working physically. I never worked with plaster myself, but a lot of that kind of thinking was also baked into the RISD education, where you had to like get the wood and cut it to size and like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe certain parts of that aren't the important part. Maybe the important part is like actually getting to shape the form once you are to
Right.
that part of the process. And I still think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah.
If it was something like heavily ergonomic, I would maybe still consider using foam and like doing a little bit of shaving here and there to get things just right. So I think designers these days have a lot of choices of tools. So I think it's really about how you apply them and not being dogmatic and saying, oh, you have to do it this way, or you have to do it like, you know,
Not so
you have to
absolutely.
make it out of plaster and then shave it down.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not a real designer, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's more about finding the right tool for the right problem.
Yeah.
You know what I would love would be if you could 3D print foam, and then I could print a rough form and then shave it
down.
off later.
I
don't
just
know
had
if there's
an
a product or a material like that.
I don't think so. I don't know. There's so many different technologies and materials that exist, so maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know about its state of readiness, and it might be a MakerBot, like you
Right.
described. Like, it may happen or it may not, which is hard to rely on. But I did think about I wonder how many designers actually use like a basic form and then use plasticine, for example, to build on top for ergonomics.
Yeah.
But like, why build the whole thing when you just
Yeah, I've definitely done that before.
yeah, and then go back digitally and change it to match or scan it even. Scanning, though, it gets you meshes that are hard to work with, so it's tough, but
It gives you a starting point that you can,
feel it out.
yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one as much, but I'm sure it's used. I think that's pretty cool. Mixed media.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's pretty cool. Let's talk a little bit about just ID jobs, because I feel like that blew up too.
Sure.
So what inspired it?
So I remember when I graduated in 2011, it was already becoming a problem where product design was being used to refer to digital, like web apps, that kind of stuff. And I know industrial designers love to like hate on that and get into a debate about what product design really is. I think if we're honest, like these days, the majority of products that you interact with on a daily basis are digital. And so do they have an equal claim to the name? It's not for me to decide. And honestly, I don't care. But it was becoming a huge problem for people looking for jobs.
Yeah.
Because you can't, like, there's no distinguishing between that when you do a job search on LinkedIn or like any other job search platform. And I think because industrial design is like a smaller field, I think we were getting crowded out by the other product design jobs. And it also seemed like the search algorithms for these websites did not distinguish between product design, industrial design, and even like interior design sometimes. Even in 2011, that was a problem.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
But then I got a job, and then I didn't really think about it as much. But in 2023, I had a little bit of extra time on my hands between clients, and I was thinking about this issue again. And it actually started as a portion of my newsletter where jobs were manually curated and put into like a list format that I just sent out as part of my weekly email at the time. And then it got a really great response. And I was honestly shocked that 12 years later, this was still such a big problem. And it is just even worse now because
So worse.
the prevalence of digital design has totally crowded out industrial design in the job market. And so I was happy to like try and like chip away at this problem, and I was actually really encouraged by the response that I got, and people really seemed to what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I started to think about what I could do with this, and I was also interested in like playing around with AI and like no code tools. So I decided to turn it into a website, and the back end of the website is like a bunch of no code tools, and there's a couple of points where AI is involved to basically take in the data and parse out what is and isn't an ID job.
Oh,
And then it
That's
feeds
an
it into the
interesting
back
use.
end of the website, and it ends up on this public job board, which is specifically for industrial designers.
just ID.
And then I wanted it to be sustainable because a lot of the tools that I was using, they do cost money. It costs money to host websites. So I decided to offer like paid promotions for companies. Like the website itself gathers publicly available job data, but it just does that on an ongoing basis, and it just updates daily. If a company wants their job posting to be featured at the top and like highlighted and basically pinned to the top for 30 days, they can pay to do that. And
Nice.
so in that way, I kept it free for the community, because the whole point was to like help industrial designers have a place to go to where they didn't have to like filter out all the non-ID jobs,
Yeah.
which is something that every industrial designer who was looking for a job already has their own little method of doing. Like you can see on forums like, oh, if you type this and
Oh, wow.
add all these Boolean search terms into the search box, you get better search
There's
results.
a Reddit group.
So yeah, so this was already a problem that everyone was tackling in their own individual way.
Yeah.
I just systemized it and tried to make it something publicly available for everyone. And in the 6 months to a year since it's turned into a real website, it's really taken off, and every month I think it gets like 30,000 hits, and a lot of people have told me that it's helped them find a job.
Good.
A lot of employers have used the site, and I've tried to get them to give me feedback on it to make sure it's
Yeah.
also helping them. So hopefully it's like a win for everyone. Like industrial designers get to see the jobs that they're interested in, employers get more relevant candidates, and I don't burn a hole in my pocket
Yeah.
because it does cost money to run.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. That's awesome. And it's only been about a year?
It's been a year since I put it up. I think I put it up last September. I think
Oh.
I only started the paid postings about 6 months ago.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
1 year old. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, though. And you know what's, I think part of why it became so popular so quickly is it was like everyone wanted it. Like you said, people were already doing it, minus like the system and the formalities. And it's like this, why didn't this exist prior type of thing. Like when I saw it for the first time, I was like, isn't there something like that? And I did a quick search. No, there wasn't.
Yeah, I
Like-
was surprised too. I was like, wait, why hasn't anyone done this yet? It seems like such a necessary tool.
Yeah, because they're all looking for jobs.
Yeah.
Like they're all busy being either the company hiring or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
employer or the prospective employees. So they didn't have time to put it together.
True.
But no, that's great. That's great. And I'm sure, yeah, 30,000 a month.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
I was surprised at how popular it's become, or
Yeah.
maybe not surprised, because like it is a problem that everyone faces.
Yeah. Do you plan on expanding on this, or do you want to keep it just ID job?
The jobs are going to be definitely industrial design focused.
Yeah.
I think the problem with a lot of other design job boards is that they are too general,
Yeah.
and I think in this new age of the internet, like niche is
Yes.
better than
Cut out the
broad.
noise.
And so I'm not planning to expand it to other design disciplines.
Right.
I might expand it geographically. It's currently only US based. A lot of people have asked to bring it to Europe, which I might try.
Yeah.
But I'm not as familiar with the market there and
Yeah.
what the job titles are. So
Yeah.
it would take a little bit of doing to get there.
Yeah. Like in terms of community building, because it seems with that many views and like you have responses, you have feedback, like that's pretty much a community. Like, do you have any ideas or desires to expand on the community building aspect of that? Or do you want it just in this format of a job board?
I think for now, I'm happy to keep it what it is.
Yeah.
I think managing a community is a full-time job.
It is.
So, rather than do a bad job at it, if it at one point like becomes like a real need, like maybe I could work with someone to do that. But I think for me right now, especially as like Just ID Jobs is like a side project because my main job is still being an industrial designer.
Yeah.
I basically only have time to keep it what it is right now.
You've got surgeries to attend.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I've got to scrub up.
Yeah, you got to do the whole triple gloving thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's quite refreshing to hear that too. There's so many people that will get that many views and they're like, okay, what else can I do? Let me pivot to that. That's the thing that's going to bring me success. But it's very refreshing to hear you want to keep the intent. Like the goal is to help industrial designers like with their careers. And yeah, there's something really refreshing about that, about keeping it really simple and keeping it what it is.
Yeah, it also keeps it manageable. So
yeah,
not everything has to blow up.
Yeah, I like that too. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So what's next for you?
I think right now what's next is probably just keep going on this trajectory. I think I've gotten to a point where I feel like a little more stable in the new career path that I'm on. Because previously I was a partner at quite a successful design firm, and that had its own kind of shape to it. And now I'm independent and working with clients on my own, which is a little less stable, I would say. But I think I've gotten to a point where I feel like this is going to work out for now.
Nice.
And yeah, I think that's really it for now. Like I don't have any
just keep building
huge plans to like take on something new. Hopefully I can keep doing industrial design and also being part of the community and get to meet interesting new people, and yeah, just doing this for a while sounds nice.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, you're essentially like building your own thing. So I'm sure there's so much from your experience being partner at Bold that's helping you on this journey. But it's also probably refreshing. Like you don't have to manage employees. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
The leadership aspect. You're keeping it simple.
Yeah. So I did get to manage, I would say, like maybe over a dozen designers, like over the years, like just not at one time, but cycling in and out as people came and went. But I really enjoyed that part of the job as well.
That's cool. You don't hear that very often.
People are really unique and interesting, and I think it's really rewarding to see when you've had an impact on someone and they have grown in their careers.
Yes.
Because of the opportunities that you've given them and the guidance that you've given them. And honestly, if anything, that's been a feature of my career, is that I've been lucky enough to find people who were willing to invest in me and give me guidance and mentorship. And I would not be where I am now without everyone I mentioned previously in the history section. And so it feels nice to also be part of that for someone else.
Pay forward.
But there is a certain simplicity to working more or less on your own.
Yeah.
It is maybe less stressful in a way because you're not as responsible for other people. Because I think when you manage a team, you're concerned about the team's well-being, whereas when you manage yourself, you're just concerned with yourself, and you can probably survive a lot more than you think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like anytime you're in leadership and management, it's all about controlling outcomes, and the variables are the humans. And it's hard. It's a lot. I enjoy it too, but not going to lie, it's a lot. It's a whole nother job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel you.
Yeah,
That's
I think
awesome.
you need specific training for that. It's not really something that I think a lot of designers just get promoted into management positions. Honestly, that's what happened to me too. But I knew that I needed guidance on that, so I sought out a lot of knowledge on
Nice.
how to do that. But
From where? I'm sure.
mostly
that could be
books.
helpful. Yes.
Also, my dad is a management consultant, so he had a lot of advice and opinions, very useful ones.
Yes.
But a lot of learning through doing.
Yeah.
I think you find yourself in situations where you've either managed something well or managed something poorly, and there's always something to learn from that.
Always. Yeah, I treat it like the design process. You just have to do it and go
Yeah.
through the motions and then iterate on it. And you can't predict everything. Sometimes you just have to fail forward, fail fast. I should get that tattooed. I really should. I say it all the time. But yeah, this was really great. A lot of great insights. I learned a lot. I thought your backstory was really interesting. I don't know. I think one takeaway I have from this conversation is you lead with intent. I think a lot of good timing, and any successful career is always half luck and opportunity, and then half recognizing it and rising up to it. And so there is some of that. But what I've gathered is you have a lot of intent with what you do. You don't fuck around.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
Purpose.
that's a good observation. I think
Yeah.
that is something that I've been trying to do a lot more as I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
I think in my 20s, and I think for most people in your 20s, just do whatever.
You go with the
Yeah.
wind and hope for the best.
Yeah, but in your 30s, like you start to want to shape where things are going a little bit more. And I think for a lot of designers, your career paths are so flexible that it is important to have some intent to it. Like, if you want to, you can take your career in many different directions.
Yeah.
Because our skills are very flexible,
Very.
as of course you're an example of.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
if
as
you,
are you.
yeah, if you don't have the intent, if you don't have like the consideration behind it, you can just find yourself pushed in the direction that the market wants, and
Yes.
maybe that's not what you want.
Yeah. And get stuck in an industry, and that becomes your whole portfolio. Then it becomes 10 years, and
Yeah.
you're like, wait, do I actually like this? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing for life as well. I think in your 30s is when you start to see more of your mortality. You're not like, I own everything. I'm gonna be this young forever.
Yeah.
And so, but you still acknowledge you have energy. And so it's like, where do I want to spend that energy? I think is a theme that at least I've been feeling. But yeah, this was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
this was
coming
fun.
along. Yeah, and I'm glad there was still like good light. I was a little worried, but
California.
yeah, and summer. Oh, wait, is it always this late? Like this late?
No.
Oh,
In the
okay.
winter,
It's like 5
super
p.m.
dark by now.
Oh, okay. Thanks for coming, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to Talking Design and Engineering on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, or follow MakeLab on social media for the latest in on-demand 3D printing services. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to Talking Design and Engineering on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, or follow MakeLab on social media for the latest in on-demand 3D printing services.